everyone could take their seats, please.
That's a blast.
I call to order the meeting of the Community Unit School District 201, today, Tuesday, June 26, 2012. Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli?
Here.
Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
We could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 22nd, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Okay, any opposed? And Diane abstained. Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the May 22nd, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
Any opposed? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 12th, 2012 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
As do I.
Are there any public comments? Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
So moved. Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
And we will return after closed session. We will now reconvene the meeting. And the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And I will ask to have the one employment of staff issue regarding the hiring of the principal pulled for a separate vote. Other than that, are we?
As well, could we pull the policy first reading, just talk about, or just talk about it? But I'd also like to pull the approval of board agreements as well.
Do you want to talk about those now?
Well, the board agreements, we obviously have another meeting with Barbara, May 30th, and there's a couple in here that are worded in a way that one in particular that I'm not comfortable with, that I don't want to give the community the wrong impression about. But rather than talk about them, I'd much rather flesh that all out with Barbara as we go through the self-eval process and then come out with a full sort of set of board agreements.
So you want to, you want to do a motion to pull this?
Yes, I'd like to table this one until we finish the process with Barbara.
Okay, so why don't we deal with that first? So there's a motion on the floor to pull item 10, the approval of board agreements. All in favor of pulling it?
Well, I mean, and I don't know that I want to be specific about what's troubling, because, I mean, it's stuff that we obviously kind of hashed about, but, I mean, I think probably the only way to do it is just to talk about it. So, one of the
Okay, so now you, hold on, now you want to withdraw the motion?
No, I'm fine. I mean, I think
Oh, okay.
after the motion, though, should there be some discussion after the motion?
Okay, so we'll do the motion.
Yes, please.
So, okay, so there's a motion to pull from the agenda, item number 10, approval of board agreements.
Well, we can
Table it?
any
Till another
yeah, to table
point?
it.
To table, so
until-
you have a motion to table it.
to table
Okay.
it until
So,
we finish the process with Barbara.
so all in favor of tabling? I know, I'm, all in, okay, there's a motion. Now, is there a second on the motion?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Well, okay.
Okay, all opposed?
I'm confused.
Okay.
Are we doing voice votes, or are we doing?
Yes. So you made the motion,
Well, because.
you seconded it. Now, I'm asking if
Okay,
people
because
approve.
I'd like for there to be some discussion after the motion so that I can be clear about what it is. Because rather than just go straight to the vote, it sounds like I should be clear about what I'm uncomfortable about.
I would agree. I'd like to know before we did a vote what his reasoning behind it was before I
Okay.
say aye or nay.
Okay, do you want to, why don't we just, do you want to pull it out of the consent agenda and talk about it?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay, then why don't we do that?
Good.
Is everybody okay with
Yes.
that? Sure. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple things on here that I think, one in particular, that I don't want to give the community the wrong impression. And it's this concept of board members not correcting each other publicly, that we have to do that in private. You know, I don't want people in the community to get the idea that we're not expressing our points of view freely, as our oath, contains. More importantly, I don't want them to think that there's some code of silence amongst board members. I think we can say that better, and we ought to talk about the construct of what that is, because it has a specific construct, and I think we need to expand on that. There are a couple other sort of minor things in here that I'd like to talk about as well with Barbara as we go through the evaluation process. But rather than just vote on what's here, there's a couple points on here that I'm not comfortable with where they are and as they're worded.
But in the process, didn't we sort of agree to all of this in the meeting with Barbara?
I think this is the first time I've seen this presented to me this way, as it's fully typed.
Okay, I'll have to jump in there. We all got this letter. It was dated May 4th, and it was from Barbara to Kevin and I, and it was in everyone's orange folder in May. And so, in the May 22nd meeting, I asked everybody during the board reports to take a look at this information, and then we would vote on it in June. because the letter that Barbara wrote to us says, "I recommend the board review and edit them if necessary, and then formally approve them at a regularly scheduled board meeting, and if appropriate, codify them into your policy manual." So we talked about this. I brought it up at the May 22nd meeting, which I did actually check that, and we did approve those minutes tonight. So the history of this is the board met with Barbara in September 6th, and then we wrote up our agreement, and then we all approved that. And then now we met with Barbara on May 3rd, and we all came up with this agreement. Now, we are meeting again with her in July, but we could also meet with her another time. So following the recommendation of Barbara Toney that we review these and edit them if necessary, that's why I brought it up at the May 22nd meeting for everybody to do that, and now it's on the agenda to approve. So I will have to say that everybody did have this.
So, so I have this question then, and it's not, it's going to sound offensive, but it's not intended that way. So just to be clear, but this is, and I'm going to demonstrate how this can be misconstrued. So am I being corrected publicly?
No,
It feels that way.
no, because.
Certainly feels that way.
Okay, because Dan, if
And
you
this is
look-
why I don't want, and the point really is not that, it's about this notion, the community seeing our agreements to this notion being misconstrued. That we ought to, and I think we all agree, be free to express ourselves, be free to express, differing points of view and differing opinions and all that kind of good stuff. So that's where I am, on this, and I just wanted to put it out there.
Then I just would refer you to then, one of the pieces in the board agreement that we talked about with Barbara was to use I statements. So one of the things that I just did was I used I statements, that I referenced the minutes, that I did that. So I'm not correcting you, I'm just stating what I did and when I talked about it. And so that's what I'm saying. So that's why it's on the agenda for tonight, because I did ask everybody to look at this, if they had any changes, make edits so that we could do what we did in September, which is post this, partly to show our community that, we take our role as a board member very seriously, and we have spent quite a bit of time with Barbara Toney from the ISB discussing this. And so if I guess I will then ask, what you're saying, if I understand this correctly, is that you don't agree with this?
No, because I think it's poorly worded.
Okay. So, does anyone?
And if we're going to vote on it tonight, I would just prefer to vote on it separately, apart from the other consent items.
I think there's always a chance to fine tune these sorts of things, and I think what we've seen is when we set a date for doing something in the future, it tends to get put off, gets delayed. What if for some reason we don't have our meeting with Barbara in July for one reason or another? Then we'll have to reschedule with Barbara. It'll be September, it'll be November before we get back together with her. And then we'll still be languishing over one sentence in a, board agreement. If we want to, we can amend it following our meeting with Barbara. If there's discussion there, that we feel that it, but I don't have a problem with the wording the way it is or anything in here. I don't think it's not a punishable offense for anyone to violate one of these things, but I think it's just, these are our guidelines and rules more for my benefit as how I should behave at the board table than anything else. And I don't see any big issue with it. I'm happy to approve it tonight the way it is.
I was just going to say, out of respect for Dan, I mean, we all know we need to be doing these things regardless of whether we vote on them or not. And if he needs more time, I'm personally okay with it, but I don't have a problem if we're still in the process with Barbara of, continuing to work on these items and, getting them to a different place.
Well, my feeling is we all sat through that 4-hour meeting, and we all sort of eventually came to conclusions of how we are to behave. And I think it's important, obviously, this is something that our community will see, but it's our behaviors that it's dictating. It's our behaviors. And clearly, your example of, was I being corrected at the board table? No. We all know what we're talking about. We all know, what was discussed in that meeting. So, again, like Joel said, I think it's a very fluid document. I think it can be amended. It can be changed. But I think it's important to, let's get it in the, we've already approved one from September. Just get it in the books and move on to the next one. And then if we do feel that it's really harsh and we can't live with it, well, then we'll rewrite it. Do you have a suggestion as to how you'd like it to read?
No, I don't, actually, because I think it's something that, candidly, it's something that the group should, in my opinion, the group should talk about and come to some conclusions about. It is just simply disconcerting the way it's drafted, where effectively it looks like a code of silence.
I will have to say again, we all sat in that room, and that's not what it was, and that's not the way anybody ever intended it. It may be the way you feel, the community will perceive it, but we all know what that line is about, and it's our code of conduct. It means, if you say this, it's cloudy out, and I say, you're wrong, Dan, it's partly cloudy. That's the correction we were talking about. And then we could argue about it for 45 minutes. It's either cloudy or it's partly cloudy. That's the correction we were talking about in that meeting. And that's what we're trying to avoid. That was my perception anyway. I feel that's what we were talking about.
Well, I will just state that I haven't heard from any other board members that this agreement, which, by the way, I want to make sure that when we're talking about the board agreement, it is just that page that says board agreement, not that topics to discuss, because that was that was like an agenda item. So I hadn't heard from any other board members that this didn't accurately reflect our conversations. So that's why it's on the consent, why it's here. And, I guess I will say that I felt that this document that Barbara sent us in May did accurately reflect the meeting. It was a very, very long meeting, but we worked on the agreement with Barbara. So this is not, as far as I saw it, this wasn't something that Barbara said, here's what you guys should say. She wrote this stuff with us. So for me, I feel it does accurately reflect what we talked about at the meeting. And so that's what I feel. So.
I like including other people's opinions or second thoughts of things. So, and I hate the idea of trashing the whole document, but if there was a way to just not really, but postpone that piece of it, just that one piece of it for a later time, and go ahead and vote on everything else, I'd be comfortable with that.
Did you say there were other components that you were not comfortable with as well?
Yeah, but none that raises to the level of something that is, that to me was just on its face somewhat disconcerting, because it, like I say, it looks like what I said it looked like.
Did you?
Well, I guess the only thing I would add is we had a meeting with her at one point. We had a board agreement. We made the agreement public. We felt that there needed to be amendments to it or changes to it, so we had another meeting with Barbara. Now we have them here before us again. I think that's what we all agreed upon, what we all had assumed the board agreement would look like when it came before us. If at the next meeting we want to discuss it again, that's fine. We can amend it then, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't just move forward with it tonight.
And just, you used a phrase, which is "we all."
You're right. You're right. I was wrong. I should have said I. I apologize. I.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Gary, you're ready to move forward on this? Dan, you?
Yeah, I just, as long as we vote on this one separately, that's fine.
We'll vote on it separately.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Is that work that we vote on it separately? Okay. So we will, from the consent agenda, now we have pulled, for tonight, pulled two things. One, personnel recommendation and approval of board agreements. Now, Dan, you also talked about policy first
Yeah, I just
reading.
had one quick question, actually. The 45% number, is that as of June 30th in any given year? When is that as of? Because low balance, you're never going to have that low balance.
Right, we're doing it, we're reviewing it when we do our 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And seeing where
So
we're
it-
at.
But it's as of a June 30th balance, right? Because that's what the PMA balances are, although they reflect two levels of balances, right?
Right.
They reflect high and low. So my point being, I don't think the intent of the policy, particularly the fund balance policy, is to suggest that on May 31st, our low point,
Right,
that we have to have
no, we're
45%.
doing, when we look at when we do our 5-year plan
Yeah.
and our projection, we look at that, and that will be our first line of defense.
Yeah.
In looking at where those are at and
but
if-
those are June 30th balances.
Well, but for the projection for the next year, for the
Yeah,
next year's
right. So June
budget.
30th, yeah, understood, but
it's-
they're all June 30 balances.
Well, what the projected June 30 balance will be. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. And
Because
so
I just
if-
want to be clear that this isn't like, on May 31st of any given year, there's a low
No,
point balance.
no.
It's way below
No.
that metric.
No, and what that will help us to actually have guiding principles that if we're looking at just our budget projections are showing that we're gonna be below that.
Yep.
That we need to do things, in January, February, March. Again, we'll look at it when we do the preliminary budget, and then again at the final budget, and then, make adjustments accordingly.
So with respect to that, I mean, is there some clarification that we can bring to this, so that it's clear that we're not in a pickle if on any given May 31st, we're below 45%?
Yeah, Shannon, do you recall the discussions? I mean,
Well, we talked about dates. I mean, we talked about when are we measuring this? That was part of our discussion, but it's not.
yeah, but I don't think we, set a particular.
Did we say June 30th? I don't think we said that.
I don't know, but we did talk about the fact that on different dates, this
It's
number would
different,
float.
Right. And I think that, one of the things, potentially, again, we're looking at it as that guiding principle. When we put together our projections, then we can look at it again when we have the preliminary budget.
I guess the concern would be if
So,
we're
because
looking
we-
at it in May, we're going to be well
Well-
below 45%. So do we need to have something written in
but
the
I don't-
policy
But it's really helping us to put together our budget and manage our budget. And we know that, May 31st should be our low point fund balances.
Typically, you look at your end-of-year
Right,
fund balances.
right.
I think the point is it just doesn't say that, I guess, is the
Yeah.
point. Is that it leaves it open to any time of the year that you look at it. If it's below 45%, then we're outside of our policy. Do we need our policy to have something that says this is not at our low point balance, or that it's an average?
I
or
mean,
that
I
it's-
think just in normal operating standard operating procedure, somebody wouldn't assume that you were looking at your May.
Right.
Because that tends to be the low point.
Right.
Or should be your low point.
The purpose of the policy is that if, as you're looking at those 5-year projections, you see where you're hitting that 45% mark, then you start to implement cost containment so that you don't hit that low
But
mark.
not
Or-
on low balances, because the
Right,
the
right,
the
end of year.
projection shows, shows low balances.
And then, or the other option is you come into the board and say, seek permission to modify the policy or do the cost containment, and you have to decide, look at how.
So we talked about it in terms of, is it like an average balance?
Right.
Or is it
That's right.
Our discussion when we met wasn't
Spread
about a
o-
specific
right.
date. It was just, how do we measure the 45% and do we need remember, we also talked about, 40 and,
Right, exactly.
right,
The
and that whole
ceiling and the-
notion of, 45's the target, but there's really a subfloor, and that was really, I think, more of what we spent time on.
Right.
Just kind of trying to get a sense of.
So is this a first read, or are
First
we
read.
adopting the policy?
No, first reading.
Okay.
And then July,
Okay.
we will do the second reading and
Okay,
adoption.
good enough. Good.
Okay, so you've got your answers to number 9.
Yes, I mean,
Because
it's
it
a
says
first,
policy
it's a
first
first
reading.
read, so I mean, we're not adopting it yet, so I think, I mentioned my,
So are we saying it needs to have that date inserted? Or is the explanation,
I mean, I think some additional clarity about when that metric is applied would help, but I mean, I'll leave that to the members of the Finance Committee to, if they want to revisit that, great. I will just say out loud that I think some clarity around that metric would be helpful for me.
Well, doesn't part of this policy, and again, I'm not the financial person, doesn't part of this policy say, if we got to that point, the board needs to take some kind of action? Well, if somebody down the line came in on May 31st and said, hey, we're below the 45%, everybody else
Well, we
would
will be
say-
every May 31st.
I know, but what I'm saying.
I mean, if we're not, that would be great,
I
but.
know. But my point is, then, you want to kick in other things. So down the road, if somebody did come in and say, hey, we're below there, we should start, cutting costs. Well, it's only because it's May 31st.
Well, and
You see
we
what I'm
could
saying?
probably just have something here that just says the 45% isn't measured on the lowest point of the year, is not measured at the lowest point of the year. I mean, it doesn't even have to give a specific date. We could probably just have something in there that kind of says that the 45% isn't measured at our low point balance. It's it's a projection of where we start and how we budget for that year. And that doesn't tie us down to a specific date, but it gets us away from people misinterpreting, looking at it at the low point.
I agree with that. I mean, it's the 5-year projection, and at any point, like Kevin said, I mean, as soon as you said that, it brought it all back.
Right.
And that at any point in that 5-year period, if it's dipping, that's when we're going to do the cost containment,
Right.
right?
But if we don't clarify our language here, we could be
Yeah, but I think we're
backdoored
really
into
talking
cost.
about the 1-year piece, anytime in a 1-year span.
Well, because in a 1-year span, there's, other than low point, it's probably second lowest point and maybe third lowest point where you're below that metric. So there's, in any given year, there's probably 3 months where you're below the metric.
Yeah, I mean-
And the PMA model is built around fund balances as of the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. So, I mean, for me personally, it just, the clarity around this is, and I understand it, which is we're looking at fund balances projected, both current and projected, as of June 30th or the end of our fiscal year on the basis of our projection. And so that would be helpful just to be pretty explicit about what that is so people didn't misunderstand it.
Because it would be very easy to look at the May number and go, oh, well, your policy says, and I don't think we want to have that situation happen either. So,
Policy committee members?
yeah, I think we can have a quick conversation about it and probably get to something that would satisfy that detail.
Without it being a paragraph long itself.
Promise.
Okay, are there any other items in the consent agenda? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Number 1, personnel recommendations of 3 employees. 2, renewal of student accident insurance. 3, renewal of SELF, workman's compensation insurance. 4, renewal of beverage contract. 5, resolution to transfer interest from working cash fund. Number 6, resolution to abate working cash fund. Number 7, resolution to dispose of district property. Number 8, GASB 54 resolution. Number 9, policy first reading. Number 11, adoption of 2012-2013 routine business office resolution. Number 12, adoption of prevailing wage rate resolution. 13, approval of June 2012 expenditure report. And 14, ratification of May 2012 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McKay.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Okay, and then there is a motion to approve the contract of Jack Balderman.
Contract?
The appointment.
Employment.
I'm sorry, the appointment of Jack Balderman.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon?
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes, absolutely.
Mrs. Charlton?
No.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
And now number 10. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the approval of the board agreements.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon?
Mrs. Thomas?
No.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
No.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
No.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, so the board agreement is approved. And just to follow up with that, can we put that document wherever we put the other one on the website? Okay, next item on the agenda, action item. Resolution to provide for the issuance of general obligation limited school bonds, Series 2012. If you would like to come on up. And if you could please reintroduce yourself in case anyone who's watching.
Sure. Elizabeth Hennessy with William Blair, and I put a presentation on your spots tonight on our pricing today of the school district's $5 million bond issue. And the numbers that we're going to go through are reflected in the final resolution, which you have seen in your board packet. It had blanks for the final interest rates in your board packets, but I have those filled in tonight with the results of the sale today. So going through the final pricing presentation, page 2 looks at the interest rate market, the 20-year AAA municipal market data, and the 10-year rates are staying very low. Page 3 looks at the yield curve, and you can see that's the lowest we've been in the last 7 years. It was a very good week to price the district's bonds. There was a large supply of Illinois bonds being sold in the month of June, and so we kind of came in at the tail end where the supply was lower, so that was good. And you know, the market's up and down. Good news in Europe means our bond market rates go up. Bad news in Europe, which we kind of had at the beginning of this week, means rates go down a little bit. So that's the market we went into. Pages 4 and 5 are what we call the comparable pricing analysis. And you see your issue with a par amount of $4,885,000, the bond rating of AA2 from Moody's Investor Service. We've got the coupon rate first, then the middle column is the yield. That's the yield to the investor and the cost to the district. And then we have the spread, and the spread represents the number of basis points over the AAA Municipal Market Data Index for today. And that AAA Municipal Market Data Index AAA is the highest rating, and it reflects on any given day the combined yield of all AAA bonds across the nation. So Illinois bonds trade at a spread to that AAA, and certainly as a AA2, 2 steps lower. That's what that reflects. And so what that helps us to do is to compare similarly rated bond issues issued at different times so that you can see the spread to the index, which would be different on different days. So for example, in 2016, the maturity, the yield was 1.15%, which is 50 basis points over that AAA MMD index. The index is at 0.65 today. If we look at Darien for that 2016 maturity, they had a yield of 127, which is a 62 basis point spread over the AAA MMD. So what that tells us, it allows you to compare the pricing on your issue versus these other issues in the market last week. So The good news is your yields are lower and your spreads are lower than many of these issues. Similar AA2 Darien, Sycamore AA2, McHenry Woodstock, that maturity is really not comparable. But then DuPage 4, which is Addison School District, priced on June 13th, and their rating is actually higher than yours. It's a AA+. And you can see their yields and their spread to the curve are a bit higher. So I'm pleased to show you that with a lower rating, you did better than a district with a higher rating in terms of your interest rates. The next page continues with these comparisons, and we have Galena deal on June 11th, Beecher School District 200, and those are AA-, one step lower than your rating, so the spread should be a little wider, and they are. And then lastly, we've got Wilmette School District 39, which is a AAA issue, meaning it's higher by 2 ratings than your district, and the spreads are tighter, which you would expect that to be. So this comparison, I think, shows you that we had a really good market and we did an aggressive pricing for you. And if we go to the next page, 6, we can see the debt service, and the all-in true interest cost on this $5 million deal is 1.92%, including all cost of issuance, and that's lower than we've been projecting. So I think you've got a very nice, good cost of funds. The bonds, the amortization schedule that we've been looking at for the last 6 months, we decided to use some of the funds on hand in the bond and interest fund to offset some of the early interest payments until your debt base is adequate to pay those bonds, as opposed to using capitalized interest, which is a cost to the financing. At one point, we were looking at refunding as well. So we avoided the cost of refunding and the cost of capitalized interest by using the funds on hand in the debt service fund, which can only be used to pay principal and interest. Okay. The next page is the sources and uses of funds. We've got a par amount of $4,885,000, premium of $193,536. And that premium is the difference generated between, if you go back to that comparable pricing, the yield, you can see they're lower than the coupons, and the difference is a premium. And the reason we have coupons that are higher than the yields is because investors really don't want to own a 1% bond or something very low. They'd like to have a coupon rate that's more marketable, like 2 or 3%. So it doesn't cost you anything, but it gives you, because what we do as we get that premium is we lower the par amount of the bonds to offset that. So your total sources of funds are $5,078,000. Then we look at the uses of those funds, how they're divided up. The project fund, of course, is the $5 million working cash. The cost of issuance is $76,814, and the additional proceeds is $1,722,000. That's a rounding amount that will go into the debt service fund. And the final page is a cost of issuance. I know you've seen these before, but I wanted to show you our original estimate without refunding. And the final, we had some costs go down, some go up, but the cost of issuance are about $3,500 less than originally estimated. And the underwriter's discount is also less by almost $1,000, and that's because the par amount of the bonds is lower than the $5 million. Okay, so altogether, you saved about $5,000 on cost of issuance. Any questions?
So on the 2007 issue, we bought rating insurance to overlay.
I don't think so.
Actually,
no.
we did.
I don't think so.
We went from AA2 to AAA, but we didn't on this one, right?
We did not buy insurance on the 2007 issue.
Okay.
No,
I do have one question about the resolution. I just want to understand on page 23 of the resolution in section 12, use of bond proceeds. So help me understand what this language means. Principal proceeds of the bonds and any premium received on the delivery of the bonds are hereby appropriated to pay for the cost of the issuance of the bonds and for working cash fund purposes, and that portion thereof not needed to pay such costs shall be set aside separate fund known as designated as working cash fund of the community. It's School District 201, DuPage County, Illinois. Which fund shall be held apart and maintained as provided in Article 20 of the Act at least until all the bonds have been retired and shall not be used for any other purpose whatsoever. So they're going into the money are going into the working cash fund and used according to Article 20 of the Act. What's covered in Article 20 of the Act? Is it everything, or is it just what?
Well, what it means is you have to put the bond proceeds and the premium in a separate fund.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I'm saying then.
Article 20 has to do with the working cash fund?
Yeah, use of funds. What does Article 20 encompass?
Article 20 refers to the working cash fund under the school code.
Okay, so can that be used for any district purpose, or is it limited in purpose?
Well, it's limited to working cash fund purposes, but working cash fund, by definition, can be used to pay
For any
for
purpose.
either capital or operating. However, because we issued these bonds on a tax-exempt basis,
Yeah.
the IRS law kind of overlaps with us and says that we have to spend those on capital projects. Otherwise, we would have had to issue these on a taxable basis.
Okay, so the tax exempt nature of the bonds, the IRS regs
Right.
are that they have to be used for capital projects
Correct. And we had that discussion with legal counsel.
with Chapman.
Yep.
Okay. That's what I was curious about.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
Our timing is good, huh?
Yes.
All right. Go to the motion. Thank you. Thank you for this. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the resolution providing for the issue of general obligation limited school bonds, Series 2012, for working cash fund purposes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, and if we could indulge the board for just a second, if we can let Mary Kay and I sign something very quick to give to her.
Thanks, Kim. All the red.
Yep.
Pressure's on. Just the red, right?
Yep. So because I had to sign two, wasn't that?
Green.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. That should be everything. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is presentation of monthly financial statements.
Okay, for the month of May, the state continues to owe the district money for mandated categoricals. The state owes the district almost $318,000 for 2012 categoricals. And we did receive word from the state. They indicated in one of their updates that the final mandated categorical payments will be vouchered in early June, but again, not paid until 2013. So again, the final two payments will be made in next fiscal year, and that's been what we've been operating under the last couple years. In terms of revenues, they're trending as expected, and expenditures as well. So again, this month, nothing unusual to report. investments, you notice that we don't have, as of May 31st, we don't have any investments. We have done some, as tax proceeds came in during the month of June, because rates are extremely low, and right now, based on our collateral position at Clarendon Hills Bank, we can earn more short-term than we can by going out, purchasing CDs or doing some other maturities right now. And again, we're at our, historically low fund balance point as of the end of May. And then the student activity account balances are attached for your review as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, then the next item is superintendent's report.
I think I'll start with, and then I'll get into the report, but earlier this meeting, the board approved the hiring of Jack Balderman to be principal of Westmont High School, and Jack was one of over 60 candidates that we had apply for the position. Those candidates were screened, and then I sat down with a group and met individually, interviewed them, and then we brought forward 6 to a committee of, we had parents, students, staff members from the district and also the high school. That group brought it down to 2 finalists, Mr. Balderman being one of those. And we brought the 2 finalists back for one final interview, and the consensus of the committee and then myself was to recommend Mr. Balderman to the board. The board then had an opportunity this evening to thoroughly discuss Mr. Balderman, his background, his career to date, and then also his career at Riverside Brookfield. Had the opportunity to ask some candid, I would say probing questions that I think for the board reached consensus that he answered those to their approval, and so I'm very pleased that tonight we're able to bring Jack on board. Jack is a 19-year, and I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself, but 19 years of experience as a principal, and I think one of the things I'm excited about when you look at his career, Jack has had an ability to bring out the best of the students and staff of the buildings he has led. He has a track record of closing the achievement gap between all different demographic groups within a school system. And he's one of those few people who talks about high expectations, but then also has the ability to develop the programs and supports necessary to allow the staff and the students to reach those high expectations. So I'm quite confident that our high school is going to be brought to new heights under his leadership. And I'll give Jack an opportunity to introduce himself.
First of all, thank you very much. I'm very excited and feel privileged to be able to be the principal at Westmont High School. So thank you to the board and to Mr. Carey. It was a great process to be able to meet some of the staff and the students and the parents and board members and administration. So the main thing I guess I want to offer is that I couldn't be more excited to start. If at any time, parents or students want to come meet this summer, we'll have formal meetings, but I'm very excited to open the door, and I'll be here this summer, and I really want to extend an invitation for them to come in and talk to me. I'm very well aware that Westmont is an excellent high school, and I hope that we as a team will take it to even greater levels, but I know that I'm walking into a place that's already doing some wonderful things, so I can't wait to work with the parents and students and staff and the community and board and fellow administrators. As Mr. Carey said, I bring a lot of experience, but it's not about me, it's about our team, and I can't wait to be a part of that. Part of that experience in my career, I've made a mistake and I let some people down, but I think I'm stronger because of that. I learned from that experience, and I can't wait to get started. I really think great things are going to happen at Westmont High School, and I can't wait to be a part of a team that's going to make that happen. So thank you very much. I really consider it an honor and a privilege. I love being a principal, and I couldn't be more excited about starting at Westmont High School.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And then continuing with my report, facility update, because of the time, I'll keep my report brief, but basically, the board's been receiving weekly updates courtesy of Mike Mayoros. And the good news is we're ahead of schedule with all the buildings. If you have an opportunity to drive past the high school, it is, even though the openings are boarded up, still, I mean, it's amazing. And then I have had the opportunity to be inside some of the classrooms as they have punched through the wall. And again, just the natural light, and to think that we're teaching, for instance, art in a room that doesn't have natural light. I mean, it just boggles the mind. So definitely that's a great improvement. Demolition has pretty much been completed at Miller and Manning, and so now the real work of designing those new spaces is taking place. It's been a smooth transition to South for the administrative team. And right now, the 2 classrooms that we've earmarked for early childhood for next fall have been painted. Kim has been involved with the teachers, picking out carpet tile and some of those things. A smart board was delivered today. So all those things are taking shape. One of the things I'm going to propose as far as playground for South is Mike and I have been in contact with the village, and we're still trying to get some information exactly what we'd be able to do without tripping some water management, stormwater management issues and those types of things. But one of the things that I'm suggesting, and I know Shannon shared with me that she's going to need to head out of town, and I think you're on the facility committee for the board. So maybe very quickly at the facility committee, if we can meet just to see if there might be, even if it's the end of this week, a date that we can get together, talk about options for South for the playground, and then put together a recommendation that then we can move forward on and inform the board about. So if you're, I think that might be the best way to move forward. We can discuss some options with the facility committee and then have an overall recommendation for the board. So that's what we're planning there. The other thing that you have in your orange folder, it's even though November seems like it's a long time away from now, but the tri-conference is occurring, and so this time of year, number one, if you can review the Friday, those sessions fill up very quickly. Review those and let Judy McMahon know as soon as possible which are the Friday options you would like so that she can get those reservations for you. Once again, the district will pick up the cost of the conference, but if you're planning on staying downtown for the conference, that is up to individual board members and administrators. That's your cost out of pocket. But again, you know, those hotels fill up quickly. So basically, if hopefully by the end of the week, if you could let Judy know if you are in need of a hotel reservation. And then the way that it works, you put your first choice to the School Board Association, your first, second, I think, through 5 choices. And then the last couple of years, we've gotten our first choice, so it's worked out well. But part of that, again, is getting things in a timely manner. So, and what we'll do is the district, in order to move it along, we'll cut the deposit check to get it off to the School Board Association, but then ask for board members to reimburse the district then. All right, and there's also one other piece of information. The School Board Association is looking for information from board members about some of the training you've have accomplished throughout the years to see who's eligible for various awards. So if you could fill that out and get that back to the School Board Association. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, are there any board reports?
I guess I would just have to piggyback on what Kevin was saying about the windows at the high school. I've been all over town, and it seems to be the talk of the town. Have you seen the high school? Have you seen the high school? Have you seen the high school? I've had a few former students come up to me and ask me what took so long. So I'm just glad to know that it's going along and it is being so well received in the community. So it looks great.
Well, I'll add to that in my house the other day, I had a couple of former and they just couldn't believe that that was happening, and they really are hoping that they can come and look at the building when it's complete. So they were very happy to hear that we're doing that. So.
One quick thing to add about the windows at the high school, and I may have mentioned this at our last board meeting, but some of the questions have been about what happens with the old bricks from the openings. And again, you know, some are being used to patch in around the new windows. We're also going to reserve some bricks for future repairs. But Mike was saying today that he thinks, somewhere around 80, maybe 100 bricks would be available. And then I'll work with the high school and possibly through one of the parent groups, maybe as a fundraiser or something, if somebody wants to purchase a brick to remember their high school experience.
This is what I looked through.
Might be a nice way for them to generate a little.
The dark years.
Yes.
I know this is very premature, but I'm assuming that there will be an open house, because I think that's one of the, I think there's a lot of excitement around all four of this, but that one is really, is there going to be an open house or?
Right, well, when we get closer to completion, right, we'll have for all the buildings an open house and opportunity for community members and parents and students to come in and
We should probably charge for that, too.
Yeah. What's our deficit? It is funny, I mean, I actually got that question a number of times about the bricks, so I called Kevin, I said, so I'm getting all these questions about the bricks, so let's just, you can do that, so.
Just related to the high school, congratulations to the class of 2012. It was my honor and privilege to hand them their diplomas, and so just congratulations to those kids. And one of the speeches actually touched on the windowless high school, which was really quite good.
I'll just add, I attended, although it's not technically a school function, it was in our high school, the PVPN production Back to the 80s musical, which was great to see on our high school stage. It's nice to be able to share our facilities with community groups who are providing unique opportunities, not only for community-wide, but certainly for a number of our students participated in that production. And it's just great to, have a role in outside entities enriching our lives here in Westmont. I don't have a SACID report as I didn't attend the last meeting due to a conflict, but tomorrow's meeting is at their Highland Hills location. This will be the first time they had a board meeting there, and that is in Lombard. And part of the discussion that's going to, we'll be undertaking is facilities and SACID. I know they've had a long-standing issue with having a fractionated or fractioned administration in different locations, and I think part of that discussion may surround facility improvements that might allow them to bring all their administration to one location. So look forward to that.
Anything else? Okay, are there any public comments? No. Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining and personnel issues.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes?
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
And there will not be a vote after closed. The next school board meeting is July 24th, 7 o'clock.